Hey, left to right out again. This time with my crappy camera, but uh, but it allows me to use a little bit better maybe sound quality as opposed to sitting in a truck on a cell phone. The big thing is right now. Well, we can talk about markets, which that's interesting in itself. I was wrong. I was expecting, one of those bear market rallies. And I don't know if this is it. Then it's not very much. It's like I think the S&P 500 is in positive territory. The Dow's in positive territory. The Nasdaq had some really bad inflation data come out today. We had the GDP number, which I don't ever, you might as well knock a few points off of that because they're never accurate because they base off of their deflator. So I don't even know what deflator they're using on this one, but I don't know. Nothing's good. I don't see anything. You have interest rates are being priced in. The bond market, I'm surprised the 10-year went down under 1.8. It's at 1.78, and so somebody's putting some money in there. But I don't know if some people are betting that the Fed can't do anything, then they're not going to try. And I don't blame them. Hey, why not put a little bit of something on that they're going to reverse policy quick, which they probably will, but I think they're going to try. And then it's going to just fail in a disastrous, burning, crashing way like a jet. But I wanted to touch on this Ukraine thing because there's other stuff I like to get into too. But it seems like since I have some knowledge of the area, or I've been there in a military capacity, this conversation between President Zelensky and President Biden seems to be stoking a lot of controversy, and it appears that CNN has been stoking the flames of war by reporting that President Biden warned the president of an imminent Russian invasion, and that they could sack Kiev, and which I mean maybe they could, I mean, but not but to stoke it as though it's an imminent and it's a foregone conclusion that this is going to happen. He even give a time frame in February, according to them, which nobody really knows what's going on. But the way President Zelensky is kind of contradicting that, or to a certain extent, but he's also been saying that the West is kind of framing this whole narrative in almost an attempt to, and I'm reading into his message, an attempt to stoke war. And then he's there, he knows it. It's not like there's tanks on the street, and not like people are being moved out of it. The only people that have been moved, it appears, is our own diplomats for some reason, because it tells me that we have some kind of actionable intel, considering how inept the intelligence agencies have been over the last few years on one of the a nation like Russia is. To me, it's laughable unless they're going to present some sort of real evidence. And even then, now that it's out there, it's like, well, Putin act on that? I mean, I don't think he would. But then again, at the press conference, that yearly press conference that Biden had, he did kind of botch and kind of just gave in and to me gave the green light to Putin if he wanted to just go in and take Kiev. But I don't even think Putin would do. See, me, I look at this as more tactical, and in order to try to avoid a hot war, I believe Putin would more likely just take, like he did Crimea, to just carve off small pieces. So the next small piece of Ukraine would probably be that Eastern Bloc, where there's probably a lot more Russian sympathizers. Now, the other interesting thing that's been reported, and like I said, this is interesting in a macro sense, that the media is like really pushing this narrative. And if you go to other news agencies that aren't necessarily Western based, you get a little more sense of what's actually going on. But they're reporting, this guardsman over in Ukraine that shot up. I think he killed 5 other soldiers. Not really a surprise to me, but I'm just surprised that I'm surprised that they're really pushing that narrative. And then coupled that, now we got that Biden and supposedly actionable intel that they might Russia invade in February. But anyway, I wanted to go into that soldier or whatever, that guardsman shot. And when I was over there, I would say this, that the Ukrainian Marines are pretty solid. The ones if there's anything left of them now, I mean, when we were over there was a vestige of them that were left because their primary base in Crimea was taken over, and a lot of their families were, over there, and a lot of them just laid down their arms because they didn't want their families to be used as collateral against them, and they didn't want them killed. Obviously, the Russians would do whatever those Russian sympathizers, the Russian dissidents there, the they're kind of almost like guerrilla arm of the Russian military in a sense, would do something to them. But the ones we were around, a couple of them, or one of them, one of their officers was Western trained. He was and key to our inter unit relationship there, but really solid crew, really solid group of guys that their Marine Corps. And I don't know what's left of them, to be totally honest. But when I was there, one of the things that my first sergeant had mentioned, we'd come across some weird characters just driving around in a Humvee, and that we were talking about how the army there seems very sorry, there's a noise. It seems very sketchy to me. Now, granted, I'm sure there's some solid individuals, but there was a lot in the lower, especially in the lower mid ranks, where it's like, do you really know if they have if there's a Russian sympathizer within there, if they're Russian infiltration, or what manner of allegiance do they have to their own military or the ideal of Ukraine in order to fight with them, or would they lay down the arms, or what is their morale state? What's their allegiance? I don't know. But we questioned it because there were some interesting actions there. In fact, we instructed a lot of the Marines to be on guard just in case something of that nature were to be observed or to be encountered. And we stayed really close with the Ukrainian Marines just because we got a greater sense of their wherewithal. They'd come off the front lines and got to see the first line of how not a counterinsurgency, but a guerrilla warfare type aspect of how the Russians were, and complementing those forces too with artillery. But it was interesting. So I don't want to get too much into like what we were actually doing over there, but I just wanted to bring that up, that hey, the Ukrainian military, not necessarily, I don't know unless it's changed within the last few years. I wouldn't put it past them to have those infiltrators, and it would be within the Russians' capabilities of doing so. But in my sense, the tactical overall objective to get away from that, to get back to the macro, is that they carve off a piece of eastern Ukraine, and then you'd use the media, their media, our Western media would be pushing for war and calling this travesty or whatever to a certain extent. But since he didn't take the whole country, he didn't come through Lviv or Kiev, and he just took that eastern spot, he could say, well, these are primarily Russian citizens or primary sympathetic. They're actually wanting that because it seems as though that's where that would be. And then it's easy to push in, just kind of like Crimea. That's how I would see this going. If it goes at all, I don't know where Putin really stands on this, and I think it's probably evolving from Joe Biden's faux pas. But not to mention that, like I've said before, I think the more tactical or the more prescient AO, area of operation, would be in the South China Sea, especially when you have F-35s apparently falling out of the sky. I think they got one, or there's been two crashes. I know there's one UK F-35. I can't remember how long ago that was. A crash off their carrier, but the one that crashed off the Vincent, apparently they're doing recovery ops on that, but they obviously won't disclose where that happened because of the fear, which I think our media is kind of stoking that too, the fear that the Chinese will get a hold of it, which to me, I think they've already reverse engineered that technology if you look at some of their fighter jets. So I don't know why there's articles in some kind of desperate panic that we need to go over there and get that in almost like another propaganda style piece to stoke the flames of war with them. But I would be more supportive of not worrying about Ukraine and worrying more about Taiwan. But even more so, we ought to worry about our own border. If we're worried about the sovereignty of another nation, but we're not worried about our own, like what does that say about us, or how long can we even last to be able to do such things? But to go back to that, the F-35, and that takes me down a different rabbit hole. I believe it's already I think a lot of the F-22. You can't tell me that Chinese infiltration in a lot of the tech sector over here hasn't lent them the ability to at least get a hold of various aspects of this technology, and you could see it kind of in their stealth technology. That there is definitely some. At least on a very, I see the word again, macro, but on a very larger level of reverse engineering. Maybe not. Maybe there's some other technologies that are within that they can't get. But the interesting thing is, a lot of these things, I bet, because this is the same way it was with the F-18, and a lot of those components are from China. I'm talking about like on the circuit board level. So you have these circuit boards. Like I worked on F-18s for a little while too when I was enlisted in the Marine Corps, and we noticed that. And there's one of the only things I was like really on board with John McCain on was like, hey, we need to work on our supply lines. He was talking about that back then because of the Chinese possible software infiltration of the jets with on and off switches or messing around with components, because we'd get like circuit boards are replaced in certain navionics or comm systems, and those chips are made in China of all things. I mean, I guess now they're Taiwan, but you could look on the circuit board and all that stuff's Chinese. And you're wondering too. I mean, granted, we'd flash them, or you put them in this little box, and it would supposedly wipe them. We could load our own stuff on there, but if there couldn't be some inherent like software that could be in there that could be triggered, or if anything, somehow you could track it somehow. I don't know. But it was always, those are things that needed to be discussed, and I never heard them discussed, of course, at that level when I was in. I don't know, but we would hear things, or we'd have to do certain things in order to keep a certain OPSEC. And then all the while, you have Chinese-made stuff that is going to this highly, I wouldn't say highly classified, but classified areas of the jet, where when it comes to comm and navigational elements of that. So, I mean, so to say that they don't have some ability to somewhat reverse engineer some of this technology is kind of insane, or not insane, but it's just a very naive way of thinking. But I would do the same thing. I wouldn't let them get a hold of that F-35 either. That's our jet. We need that, and not, for many reasons. One, you don't want them to, even if there is some technology to get a hold of it. But on the comm nav side, you don't want them to get any kind of encryption data or frequency data from those components. But two, because that was one of the fears, like if we had F-18s down, is you want to go to destroy certain things that so they can't get a hold of it, so they can somehow use it to intercept communications and be able to track jets. But anyway, they would the fear would be that maybe there is some technology, but we want to know why that thing crashed too. So we want to get those things. We want to examine it, hold an investigation. I think I've talked about like how the military will launch certain investigations, sometimes on a minor level, with an individual that is tasked from higher to go and look into this stuff. But in this case, it'd be a pretty significant investigation to see why this thing crashed. And there's some significance that you think about how long this F-35 has been in development. I'm sure when I was enlisted, this thing was supposed to be, when I was coming back from on a carrier with a carrier group back to the States, we were supposed to be training up on the F-35. I remember seeing a couple manuals come across, and this was in 2007. And of course that didn't happen. And you think about what are we? 2022, and now we're finally getting these things operational on a carrier group. So it's strange to me, the whole thing, and we can get into that some other way. But anyway, our foreign policy is just completely jacked up. But the thing that allows us to even have such a foreign policy is our economics, and that's why I always focus on that a lot. And the devastation has been handed down through monetary, and more as a major role, but more of a minor role, the fiscal policy, and then I'll roll fiscal policy into the government and regulations or whatnot. But these things, are eroding away at the foundation, and it allows us to have such a powerful military. And when I go at people like, hey, we need to cut the military budget because we need to get our own house in order so that in the future we can have a powerful military, they tend to scoff at me, even though I was in the military and I understand the waste, and I understand the economics of the overall picture. They scoff at me as more like an anti-military, or like, what are we going to do? Well, if we don't do something, eventually we're going to have to cut, or the military is going to degrade itself through our own economic policy. So it's imperative that we do this now, or shore up the foundation of the very society and the very mechanisms that allow us to be able to project our power throughout the world. And we'd like to hope, ideally in America, we like to think that this power that we project is for good, and and ideally that is the case, and most of the time that is the case. Of course, there are nefarious characters that are running around, especially in the intelligence communities, that are doing things in what they believe in altruistic fashion, but they cause more harm than good for ourselves and for the nations that they're involved with. But anyway, I'll leave it there. I know I go I go down a lot of rabbit holes. It's just me here talking, but so don't believe everything you see about Ukraine and us and the Russians. Um, you can look at it from many aspects, just the absurdity of it, but then also the timing of it seems pretty eerie. So, not to say that that is uh, a conspiracy, but when certain coincidences happen, you got to at least put it over here in this side of your brain housing group and just kind of maybe refer back to it, or maybe that piece of circumstantial evidence might come to play as other things are revealed and be like, oh man, there might be an actual agenda behind this thing. But anyway, I'll talk to you later. Peace.